My favorite thing to do in Atlanta at night is to go up on top of a parking deck. It could be the one at my apartment or the one at the student center, doesn't matter. And just look out at all the countless buildings that make up my surroundings. There's glowing lights, trees swaying with the wind, and sometimes people walking up and down the busy streets of Atlanta. I like to think about the hustle and bustle of the city, all the crazy things happening inside of those buildings. And as I look around, I see all the beautiful landmarks that define the Atlanta skyline. The momentous Mercedes-Benz Stadium, the endlessly tall Pencil building that we all know and love. And then my eyes settle on something that is something more subtle. The Al Farouk Masjid over on 14th Street. To me, this building is very, very important. Not just because its minaret boldly pierces into the night sky, nor because I'm Muslim myself, but because of one small room in the basement of that building. You see, every Sunday from 12 to 2 p.m., there's a room down there that functions as a free clinic, serving anyone who happens to walk in through its doors. It's not a big room, nor is it fancy. It just consists of a small open area, 2 cubicles, and a storage cabinet in the back. Yet every Sunday, every week, approximately 15 to 25 people come here to have their health checked upon. Some are coming for a general checkup, some for blood work, some for refills, and even a few for medical emergencies. The team that works there consists of one doctor and, of course, several volunteers, one of which happens to be me. And as volunteers, our job is simple. We just do everything that the doctor doesn't do. Before the patient sees the doctor, we triage them, which means we take their weight, their blood pressure, we talk to them about their medical history and problems, and we look for their old papers if they visited before. Sometimes we have to perform blood draws, sugar tests, and we're always talking to patients about the lifestyle steps they should be taking to better their health. I've been volunteering here since about halfway through my sophomore year at Tech, so it's been about a little bit over a year. And even though this clinic is only open for 2 hours a week, it just so happens to be one of the most profound experiences of my life so far. To me, this clinic is so much more than just a precursor to a future career in medicine. You see, my entry into college, and in fact, the first 2 years felt like a very rude and tough awakening. And I'm sure many of you have felt the exact same way. In high school, I was a big fish in a small pond, at the top of my game, one of the smartest in my class. And then I came here to Tech. Many of us go through this phase of going from a small, close-knit community to something much bigger than ourselves. And you know what they say. They say that bigger is better, don't they? But the issue is that it made me feel smaller. I felt very insignificant during my first 2 years here. I was surrounded by amazing professors and upperclassmen doing cool things like groundbreaking research and projects, other things like startups and internships. It was so hard not to compare myself to what other people were doing. I felt as though I was already behind. Every time I compared myself, I felt as though I was lost. It was intimidating, and I felt useless, like a tiny, forgotten blip on the radar, a feeling that I now know as imposter syndrome. And with this came this idea, this false reality, that I can't be impactful in this world because I'm too young and naive, because I lack formal experiences. So about 1 year ago, some friends introduced me to the clinic. I went there and I started volunteering there regularly. And after a couple months or so, I noticed a small change in my mindset, especially after one specific instance. We had finished up at the clinic one day, and so we were all headed home. I got into my car, and as I was leaving the parking deck, another car came up next to me. They honked at me, they yelled at me to lower my window, and of course I thought I had messed up. I lowered my window and I got ready to apologize, and when I looked at the person, I realized that they were one of the patients who was at the clinic earlier. In the passenger seat was his wife, and in the back, 2 beautiful children. And for whatever reason, this guy, he just started to talk to me. For 15 or 20 minutes, he just told me everything about his life, his battles with depression, his financial instability, and his issues with diabetes. And at the end, he said something that I still think about to this day. He said, "Thank you, doctor. I wish there were more people like you." Do I look like a doctor? Of course, I'm not. Obviously, I'm not. Look at me. But to him, why does it matter? I had helped him that day. That's all that really does matter. I remember I went home that night, really thinking about that experience, really confused about what had just happened. I sat down on my bed, I pulled out my laptop, and I just started writing down everything that I was thinking, all the experiences that I was going through, all the memories that I had made at this clinic. And I realized that there were 3 really big, important lessons that I was learning at the clinic. Lesson number 1. You don't have to be a professional or have formal experiences to help people out with their lives. There's no correlation between the two. If you did have to be a professional, that would mean that you're useless to society until the day that you get your degree or job or whatever. But that's just not the case. And I started to see this through my experiences at the clinic. Simply being there, being in a position of care, it makes the patients trust me. I realize that the words I speak and the actions I take actually resonate with them. For example, every time I read out someone's blood pressure, I try to blend it with a positive twist, something along the lines of, "Wow, that looks perfect." The guy that I mentioned earlier, all we did for him was give him some diabetes test strips so that he could go home and not have to come to the clinic every week to see how he was doing. Being at the clinic made me realize how painfully easy it actually is to help someone. Simply being there, shaking a patient's hand or talking to them about their day, all of that goes a long way into changing their lives. The second lesson. Instead of spreading yourself thin, doing a lot of things at once, really dedicate yourself to one cause that is really important to you. This clinic is important to me, so I try to be there as often as I can. And every time I'm there, I feel as though I've learned. I feel as though I've grown. Every patient that comes through our doors is slightly different. They have different wants and needs, and there's a wide variety of medical issues and language barriers that we have to overcome in order to provide them quality care. And don't get me wrong, it does get very tough sometimes, but what I've learned through trial and error is that if you stick to something even when it gets tough, even through those ups and downs, then you will learn. You will grow, and you will eventually witness and master every portion of what you're doing. The third lesson is a little bit different from the other two, and it's to take care of yourself. As you go down a path of volunteerism, spending time helping others, it can become a bit of an emotional burden. At the clinic, we're constantly surrounded by people who haven't had the best of luck in their lives, stories of hardship, people who I can't even imagine being in their shoes. And if I don't take care of myself, doing what I like to do in my spare time, then there's no way that I can go out and handle the roller coaster of emotions that goes on at the clinic. I've realized that before you go out and help other people, you need to make sure you've taken care of yourself. We all know the analogy of the cups, but it's so true. Before you go out and help other people, before you fill other people's cups, you need to make sure that your cup has something in it first. So this is great and all for me, and yeah, I've learned a lot, but what does it have to do with you all today? Chances are most of you won't ever help out at a free clinic, and I'm not asking you to. Nor am I asking you to join a volunteering team or organization. But what I do want us to realize is that we don't need to limit our definition of volunteering to dedicating a particular set of time at a particular place doing a certain thing. It's much simpler than that. In fact, I argue that volunteerism is any act of service that makes the lives of those around you easier. It can range from helping out at a free clinic to maybe giving someone a ride, or even the classic example of smiling at someone. Those are all valid forms of volunteerism. This way we don't feel pressured or restricted to be a professional in a field or have a certain degree or job or whatever. None of that needs to matter anymore. Let's make it an open playing field, an even playing field. The other limitation we have regarding the definition of volunteering is that it is purely altruistic, and it's not. We fail to realize that there's something deeply rooted in the act of service that helps the volunteer as much as it helps other people. The word selfish just seems wrong to say, doesn't it? Society has seemingly given it a negative connotation. But to some extent, selfishness is definitely healthy. For me, knowing that I was able to take part in slightly relieving someone's pain, giving them a reason to smile, go home, sleep a little easier, that fills me with a sense of legitimacy and accomplishment, maybe even some pride. I feel as though I've entered a community, a subset of people that I know I've positively impacted. Sometimes I think back to what that guy said to me in the parking deck. He said, "I wish there were more people like you." And I wish that I could go back in time and tell him that there are. What do you mean? There's so many people like me. Look at this room. By a show of hands, how many of you know Georgia Tech's motto? Tech's motto is progress and service. It's funny because we go to a school that asks us to help other people, to build other people as much as we're building ourselves. It's not progress or service, it's progress and service. So as members of this community, as students or affiliates of Georgia Tech, we need to make sure that we're living up to that standard, that challenge. And here's what I want you to do. Try to be a volunteer every day. Take note of your actions, the way you talk to the people you care about, the way you help others in either big or small ways. Identify some of the things that you do to make the lives of those around you easier. You may realize that without even knowing it, you're already having an impact on your surroundings, your community. And at the end of the day, remember those moments. Write them down if you have to. Whatever you do, never let those memories fade, because you're going to look back on them with pride. And at the end of the night, as you go to bed, or if you're like me, as you gaze out at the skyline in the middle of the night at the top of the parking deck, always remember that you do embody the true spirit of a volunteer. Thank you.